Today I've got a very special game for you. We're going to take a look at Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. But before we look at the game, let's talk a little bit about Inti Creates. These guys have been around since 1996, and I kind of find it funny that a whole bunch of people today say, oh, well, you know, Bloodstained's not going to turn out to be that special because these are the same guys that made Mighty Number 9. And well, the truth is, these are also the guys that made all the Mega Man Zero games on the Game Boy Advance. They also made Mega Man 9 and 10, Mighty Gunvolt, and even the excellent Blaster Master Zero. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, basically, these guys have made some excellent games, and I'm perfectly comfortable with them handling Bloodstained Ritual of the Night and Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Now, I'm not entirely sure how much or how involved they're going to be in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, but they made Curse of the Moon, and Curse of the Moon is absolutely fantastic. You can think of it like a reimagining of Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. Koji Igarashi has led the project, so you know that this is going to be a quality product. And unlike Mighty Number 9, Bloodstained has only ever looked promising. And every time we get a chance to see it and play it, it's been shaping up better and better every single time. And as part of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Kickstarter, this very side game, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, was announced and was, well, heavily inspired, like I said, by Castlevania 3 on the NES. I actually thought this was a brilliant idea to release this game first, as it would not only introduce the characters to the masses before Ritual of the Night hit, but it would also allow Castlevania fans to enjoy both genres, the action games from years past, and the Metroidvania-style games that came after Symphony of the Night. So here we are, the very first Bloodstained game, and I personally think they could not have done a better job. It is wonderful. The concept is exactly the same as Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. There's no beating around the bush with that statement. The man that is most directly responsible for Castlevania in the modern time is the guy who's behind this game, so it kind of makes sense. Bloodstained features reworked versions of Medusa heads, zombies, and all manner of classic enemies you're used to fighting. The patterns are the same, the core gameplay mechanics are the same, and even the music sounds vaguely familiar, but we'll break down each one of these components to show you that it doesn't matter if they're the same, they're excellent. The graphics look like they were just ripped from the NES, although the game's perfect frame rate and color palette clearly shows advancements over what the NES hardware could actually do. That said though, the individual color schemes used are absolutely perfect and very reminiscent of the legacy hardware. Each stage features the classic Castlevania level design, and like Castlevania 3, you can expect branching paths based on which characters you have in your party. And I'll get to that in just a little bit, but for now, you can rest easy in knowing that the game looks beautiful. I especially loved how each area has parallax scrolling and feels wholly unique compared to the area that preceded it. The soundtrack, though, I was less impressed with. And that's funny because just about everyone says that the soundtrack is great, and having just come off the demo for Ritual of the Night, I can say that I didn't find Curse of the Moon soundtrack to be nearly as compelling. And sure, the tracks are well composed and they sound good, it's just, I don't know, I didn't find that they fit the game's overall design as well as the tracks did from Ritual of the Night. At one point, I grabbed my copy of Konami's Dracula Battle Perfect Selection, and yes, that's actually what it's called, and I switched to Bloody Tears, and let me tell you, that fits. In terms of gameplay, as I've mentioned multiple times now, this is Castlevania 3. You start the game off by playing as a sword-wielding dude called Zangetsu, and as you beat each of the game's first 3 stages, you're given a new character to play with, eventually having 4 party members with the ability to switch back and forth between them at a moment's notice. There's Miriam, the main protagonist from Ritual of the Night, and who is essentially your typical Belmont, yes, even with a whip. There's the alchemist Alfred, who has very low HP but can control some very powerful magic abilities, and finally Gebel, the Alucard clone. And if you recall from Castlevania 3, Alucard could transform into a bat and fly around the screen, same idea here. Each of these characters has their own pros and cons, and only by using each one of them can you truly experience absolutely everything the game has to offer. The basic gameplay is also very familiar, where you break candles to collect items that are then used for triggering your secondary items or weapons, which include everything from a protective flame barrier to throwing knives, axes, and much more. This is truly the Castlevania action game you've been waiting for since Castlevania 3. Boss fights may not be quite as memorable as the bosses in Castlevania, however I love how they have the Desperation attack from Rondo of Blood, which means you're not completely out of danger once you deliver the final blow to the boss. I suppose now would be the appropriate time to mention the different difficulty settings. There are technically two different difficulty settings, Casual and Veteran. Casual prevents the dreaded pushback mechanic where enemies hit you and you go flying backwards, and grants you infinite lives, whereas Veteran has limited number of lives and the enemy pushback. On top of that, there are a bunch of different modes that unlock as you play through the game. The normal or default mode sees you playing through the game as Zangetsu and has you recruiting, killing, or ignoring the other three playable characters. Now, depending on the actions that you take during this playthrough, it will completely change the second playthrough. Now, I don't want to give it all away, but in total there are 6 different endings, and unlocking them, or figuring out how to unlock them, is half the fun. Overall, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is the perfect way to ease players into this brand new franchise, and I love how we have this old school game that allows us to learn who these characters are and get to know them before the massive Ritual of the Night game hits. This way, we will all have associations, nostalgia, and a better understanding of this unique world before we get a game that lasts, quite a few hours. Curse of the Moon is fantastic because you can polish it off in under 2 hours, but requires multiple playthroughs in order to really get the most out of it. When I finished all the different modes, I found myself wanting more, and now that I've just finished off the E3 demo of Ritual of the Night, I can safely say the final game can't come soon enough. In the meantime, I wholeheartedly recommend Bloodstained Curse of the Moon on any platform you can buy it on. It is a fantastic throwback to one of the greatest franchises ever made.